We're working on our apple cider this year. We've got a couple bins of apples. We've got some different varieties here to make a mix of sweet and tart. So step one is wash the apples. Once the apples are washed, they go over to the second station. In the second station, they're getting cut and trimmed so there's no bad spots in them. The third station, the cut pieces go in here and they end up going into a food processor. And they get shredded into little pieces. So this is the last part of our setup for pressing. I am just using a cheap 12-ton press. This is actually a Harbor Freight press that I use out in the shop, but we cleaned it up nice for today. And we're using a high-end Home Depot bucket. I've just gone to this bucket and drilled 1/4-inch holes in the bucket the whole way down and used some heavy-duty zip ties to go in between each of the holes. And that will help keep the bucket from splitting. And then I go and find, these are liners that you can find for straining paint for 5-gallon buckets. And then we just put our shreddings down in there. And we found that shredding this works the best way. I also just go out and buy a cheap turkey roasting pan, like one of the aluminum ones, to put down underneath it to catch all the cider as it drops down. And then to press that down into there, I have made myself, just out of wood, we just took a piece of wood and made a wooden plug to go down into there. And so it just sits in on top of the shreddings, and we can just use the shot press to push down on that. Now you have to be careful with this, because if you push too hard, that will blow that bucket up. You got to be very, very careful to make sure that it's not pressing too hard on the apples down in the bottom of that. And you've got to get the spacing right. It took a little bit figuring out the depth of that to put into the bucket. Okay, so what I end up doing with this is we've got it about full to about half this bucket. I'm going to take this and I'm going to curl it up. Basically just set it down in there, and I'm going to put this plug in on top of it because I don't want these shavings getting down in there. So put this plug down in. And basically I'm going to push down on this to adjust the board underneath it a little bit. So one of the tricks to this is I need to put a board underneath there so the bucket sits on it, because that bucket can blow out if you're not careful. So
what happens if we it'll be really obvious.
I'm going to start pressing this just like that, nice and slow. And you don't want to go too fast because it can actually squirt. It can squirt the cider out the sides of this. As it starts to press, you'll really get quite a bit of cider coming out of this. So I found this design on the internet. For the bucket and stuff like this. You just got to be careful that it doesn't kick sideways in there. It's starting to kick sideways right now. So I'm going to bring this back up and readjust. So it's got to press straight down on there. But we tried this with a friend of ours. It was actually a friend of a friend, and purchased a high-end press. One of the ones that you can actually use, I think they got it through Layman's, and we purchased, it's all stainless, and we had one of those it wasn't last year, but the year before. And it was right next to this press. And what we did is we actually weighed out shredded apples, and we put the same amount in his press as this press. And the idea was to see which press was faster, and also which press produced more juice from the apples. So when we did that, we were expecting the press that his press cost quite a bit of money, and we were expecting his to do quite a bit better than ours. And at the end of the test, I believe that we actually pressed it faster, and we pressed more juice out of the apples than he did. And he was actually quite upset about it. But this setup isn't foolproof. Obviously, you do still have to go out and purchase a shop press. But if you happen to have one of these in the garage, or maybe you're thinking about getting a shop press, this works really, really well. So,
do you remember how much the other apple cider press was?
I think it was over $2,000.
Okay, and that was several years ago.
I'll take a look after we're done here and get you guys some numbers up on the video for how much these shop presses cost, and also how much the setup that he had costs.
Because with our setup, I believe we got the shop press on sale, and it was $120. And then
it was around $120.
And then we had spare wood, and like the aluminum pans, you can get it in each supermarket for cheap. And I just use a canning pot at the bottom, and then it's the bucket and the zip ties. So we have less than $200 in the whole setup.
And being a 12-ton press, you can easily overpress this. So you've got to pay close attention. Look at how much juice is coming out of your bucket, out those holes. And you don't want to just crank down on this, because it will blow that bucket up if you're not careful. And I don't know if you can see that coming out of those holes. I'll try to press it here at the same time. And then what we'll do is we'll mix all of this together, so all the sweet apples and the tart apples end up in the same bin. That way we've got a nice mixture for our cider. So when we're done here, I've just taken the plug out of it. The apple shavings that are down in there should be fairly dry, and I'm actually going to taste them to see if they have any flavor. They've got barely any apple flavor. They're both mostly just fibrous. So that means I got most of the juice out of them. Now these shavings, there's a couple different things you can do with the shavings. First thing you can do, you can actually put the shavings into a glass jar, pack the jar about half full, and add water to it, and let it sit for how many months? You pretty much just cover the top of it, and you let it sit for like 2 or 3 months.
I do it longer than most people do, just because I want to make sure it's completely done. That, and I have so much other stuff going on. I just forget about it sometimes.
By the way, it makes apple cider vinegar. So if you guys want to make your own apple cider vinegar, you can do that with the leftovers that are in that bucket. The other thing we end up doing with it is all these shavings that are in here will get thrown into a bucket, and that'll go out to the pigs, and they will be quite happy here this winter to have apples. So that's our whole process. Cheers.
These are all the feet of the helpers. Wiggle your toes.
That's good. Good cider.
Wiggle your toes.